Welcome back to this module on targeting. So we'll talk in this module about some of the different ways that you have of targeting your ads. A lot of people, when we start talking about GDN, whether that's YouTube ads or banner ads, they frown and those annoying things. Well, in Google's eyes, and I would agree with Google here, that an ad that isn't well targeted to you is going to be annoying. But if it is well targeted, if you're seeing the right message at the right time, then actually that's going to be very useful, and it's probably going to cause you, some of the time at least, to click and to maybe remind you about a product that you haven't quite finished buying yet, or it's going to help you with your research and information or some comparison shopping. So getting the targeting right is absolutely key to getting your advertising in general, whether we're talking about search, display, Facebook, whatever it is, your targeting needs to be right. There's a few different options which we'll walk through fairly quickly. The first and the easiest one to get your head around is this thing called managed placements. So that just means that you manage the places where the ads show. You get to choose the site or even the part of the site where your ads get to show. As we talked about in the last module, there are over 2 million sites that are part of GDN and over 1 million apps. And you can target those individually should you want to. If you believe that your target market hang out on Oprah.com or maybe the tech section of Sydney Morning Herald, you can say to Google, just put my ads there. The benefit of this is that you retain an enormous amount of control. You don't need to worry about fraudulent sites. We'll talk about those later. You know exactly where your ads are going to show. The downside is that you're not really doing any discovery. You're not finding new places that could work very well for your ads. So the next bit of targeting is then to say to Google, well, okay, I'm going to give you a theme. I'm going to define a theme, and I want you to find pages within these 2 million sites that match those themes and show my ad there. So if we're looking over here at yoga and Pilates, these are a list of some of the topics that are available to you. There are over 2,000 topics, around 2,200 or so topics. Every single page on every single one of those 2 million plus sites has been categorized by Google using its machine learning into one or more of these topics. So you can say to Google, hey, go find me all of the yoga and Pilates pages and put my yoga ad on those pages. The assumption being, it's a pretty good one, the assumption being if they're on a page reading about yoga and stuff that has to do with yoga and Pilates, they're probably a good target for your offer. You can use keywords to define those themes as well. So you might use keywords like yoga or yoga mat or yoga class or yoga course, and you might use a list of keywords. So similar to the way you might already be doing in search, but it's a little broader, it's a little fuzzier. It doesn't necessarily mean that that keyword that you pick has to appear on that page. Google's going to sort of interpret the keywords that you give it and come up with this idea of theme. So much better to think in terms of theme than individual keywords. So that's if you want to target a particular page, and that's going to be based on the content of that page. So you're either targeting the URL or the content. Where we get much more interesting then is to get into what do we know about the person searching. So we might know, for instance, that they have been to our website in the recent past and they're on one of our remarketing lists. Maybe they're on one of our email lists that we can upload to Google and say, here's my list of 50,000 emails. If you notice any of these people wandering around the web, show my ads to them. So based on the fact that they're on one of your lists. And another list, that the last list you can use here, is a YouTube list or a video viewer. So somebody that's seen my video on YouTube, Google, build a list of those, please. Now, these are invisible lists, the remarketing and the video viewer ones at least. You don't get to see who's on the list. Google will tell you there's 7,000 people on your video viewer list. You don't get to know who they are. Google knows who they are. And if you want to use that as a targeting option, you say, Google, follow those people, please. And when you see them on a site, I'd like to put an ad in front of them. With all of those lists, you also have what are known as similar audiences. If you use Facebook, this is known as lookalike audiences, same deal. Facebook are much better at this, I think, than Google at this point. There are some changes coming to similar audiences, But essentially, Google's going to use all of its machine learning and all of the data that it has on all of us to determine who are very similar to those people. So if you've got a list of buyers and you load those 10,000 emails up into Google, it will automatically create a list of people similar to those people. If you have a list of people that have visited your product category page in the last 14 days and you've built that remarketing list, Google, if you've got enough people on the list, Google will automatically create a similar audience, and you can use these as additional targeting options. I would start with the main lists, and then once you're getting those profitable, then test the similar audiences. And then this is for me, the really interesting one is based on people's behavior. And this is a new sort of concept that I'm trying here, so bear with me. But you can basically break this down into a long-term interest. So think of this as 1 to 2 years, or a short-term interest, 1 to 2 weeks. And then you have some fixed categories and some custom stuff where you get to build your own. So the fixed long-term one is called affinity. So this is very similar to how TV advertising has been bought and sold for decades. People that are interested for a long period of time in a particular area. That might be basketball or the outdoors or parenting or investing. So they have this wide-ranging interest. What in market is, if we come down and talk about just the fixed categories to begin with, fixed but in the short term is something called in market in the Google system. So they have this interest, and fixed just means I have to choose from a list that Google gives me. So there's a list of about 100 affinity audiences and a list of around about 500 in-market audiences. Those are fixed by Google. If what you sell is on that list, fantastic. Use that for targeting. If it's not, we might have to use a custom list. So in-market is all about that short-term behavior. Think of it as unusual behavior. They have been interested in golf for a long time, and they were in the golf affinity audience, but now all of a sudden they're looking at yoga and Pilates stuff, and they don't normally do this. This is unusual behavior for this person. And just in the last week or two, they've been searching for yoga terms, they've been looking at yoga websites, they've been watching yoga videos on YouTube. Google knows that, and so it essentially tags that person as being in the market for yoga equipment, and you get to target based on that recent behavior, that short-term behavior. Now, and these lists are publicly available, you can find them in your AdWords account, you can find them on a tool that I'm going to give you in a future module called the display grid. I've got a list of all of these written out for you, so you can scroll through them and see if what you sell is on that list. If it's not, you might have to go build your own audiences. So kind of like we did with the themes, with the keywords, we get to say to Google, using this, and we'll talk about exactly how to do this in more detail later, but using this sort of group of keywords and maybe some URLs, we can define a theme here and say to Google, people that have this long-term affinity for this particular thing. So it's not on the list of 100. We don't get to use one of the fixed audiences, but we can create our own, but this is still a long-term thing. The one I'm most excited about, and this is new for 2018, and I think this is the future of Google Display Network, so I'd urge you to dive in here and have a play with this one, is custom intent. So when it first launched, it was essentially called Custom In-Market 2.0. It's gone through a couple of name changes, but essentially you get to, again, define this theme using some keywords and maybe some URLs to say to Google, people that are looking for this sort of thing right now, this is unusual behavior for them. They've been searching and browsing and watching stuff about this just in the past couple of weeks. Those are the people that I want to target. So this is kind of the grown-up version of keyword targeting, if you like, because now we're not talking about what is on the page that they're viewing and defining the theme of what they're viewing. We're defining the theme of who they are and targeting them based on their behavior, their intent, not just based on the stuff that they're reading. And then we can also target or add some targeting using demographics. So we can either just say, Google anybody that's on YouTube as long as they're 55 plus and female, you could do that. Or you could layer some demographics over your other targeting. So you might say people that are in the market for yoga, but I only want to show ads to people 25 plus. And you can use age, gender, and even household income. Household income isn't perfectly accurate, but it's a bit of a guide. So you might not go too heavy on that. You might not rely on that too much. And then if you really want to get funky, you start to combine some of these different targeting options. And so you might say, in this particular example here, Google people that are on pages about this theme, which is the keyword stuff on the left, but also people that are in the market for this thing. So just find me the overlap of that little Venn diagram and only show my ads to people that are both reading information about this and are currently in the market for this thing. Don't worry about that if this is your first time playing with Google Display, but this is where we tend to get the best results. Once we start combining different targeting options and getting really refined with our targeting, that's when obviously you're going to get the best results. Now you can also, just as you use, if you're familiar with negative keywords on the search side, you can have exclusions on the display side. So all of the targeting that we've just talked about, you can use to say, Google, don't show my ad to people on this remarketing list. My existing or recent buyers, don't show them ads. Or don't show ads to anybody over 55. Don't show ads to guys. Don't show ads on these particular sites, because I've seen over time the performance from those sites has been really poor. So I actually want to tell you explicitly, do not show ads there.